Welcome to this wonderful event. We are delighted that you're here. My name is Lincoln Davies, and I have the honor and privilege of serving as the co-director of the Wallace Stegner Center for Land, Resource, and Environment, along with my incredible colleague, Rick Daniels. We're just delighted you to be here tonight. And before we begin, I have just a few brief announcements. First, I want to extend our thanks. I want to extend our thanks to the Natural History Museum of Utah for hosting us here this evening and for partnering with us for this very special event. And I'd also like to thank Cultural Vision Fund for their ongoing support of our Green Bag series, of which this is a part. I'd also like to thank each of you for being here tonight and joining us for this important conversation about Yellowstone and conserving nature in an iconic landscape. We're going to have a conversation here tonight that is a treat. We are in for a treat. I am confident of that. The conversation is going to be conducted by Jennifer Napier-Pearce, who is the Chief of Staff for the Eccles Foundation and previously served as the Editor-in-Chief of the Salt Lake Tribune, as well as the Head of Communications for Governor Spencer Cox. Jennifer is an award-winning journalist and led the Salt Lake Tribune from moving the first newspaper in the country to move from a for-profit entity to a nonprofit entity. She's going to be talking with our colleague, Bob Keiter, who is the founding director of the Wallace Stegner Center 30 years ago. Bob came to Salt Lake from Wyoming. He is the leading scholar in the nation on national parks and a trustee of the National Parks Conservation Association, as well as the Foundation on Natural Resources and Energy Law. This is Bob's by counting right, and I'm looking at him to see how I'm counting right. Besides treatises and other academic books, I think this is your fifth book, Bob, and his second on Yellowstone. So we're going to hear about the challenges that Yellowstone faces and how those challenges and the solutions to them might serve a broader purpose in our nation and our ecosystems. Bob has written extensively on national parks. He is a Fulbright Fellow, and he also is one of the leading scholars in the nation working to embed ecosystem management in the law. So with that, and without any further ado, I'm going to welcome to the stage Professor Bob Keiter and Jennifer Napier-Pearce.
Back to you.
Keiter, it's the Bob Keiter fan club tonight. Look at this. It's great. I am just absolutely thrilled for the invitation to come here and to spend an hour with you just talking about this beautiful place. I told a friend of mine that I was going to an event to talk about Yellowstone, and she said, the TV show? So my first question is, have you seen the show? What do you think about it?
I've seen parts of the show, and it paints it partially accurate of the area. I'll try to give you the more accurate picture you see me.
Well, honestly, and we're going to talk about the real life drama of Yellowstone and the Greater Yellowstone area. How did you get so enmeshed in this region of the world?
It's a good question. I'm not from the region. I grew up in the East Coast. I traveled west first in 1967. And my buddy and I ended up having a very close encounter with a bear in Yellowstone National Park during that trip. And went on to hear a forest ranger regale us about the bear stories that made us think that we were pretty stupid with what that happened. But at any rate, little did I know at that point in time that 20 or so years later that I would end up refocus, if you will, on Yellowstone, that it would become an important part of my professional career. That happened shortly after my wife and I moved to the University of Wyoming College of Law.
Great. Well, congratulations on the book, the second book, the many other books. But this latest one, it really it's a significant undertaking. And it really does though pretty thoroughly in the history of this beautiful place. Just right, the Greater Yellowstone, it's a session. Geographic, what is area?
Well, I'm merged.
Hello?
No, je belong.
Hello? Kansas, or to drink pacta?
Well, okay, go ahead.
He didn't hear the question. Hello? Friday, yeah. Yeah, the green button's on. Hello? Census. It is up?
Should he?
Y'all here?
Well, no.
Here?
They're saying no.
Okay, we're back.
Street.
Describe the geography. What area are we talking about when we talk about Greater Yellowstone ecosystem?
There's a map up there that helps to give you a sense of the Greater Yellowstone ecosystem. And from your side, the map on the left has dotted lines that outline what is regularly referred to as the Greater Yellowstone ecosystem. And I should add, just to begin with, that there's absolutely nothing legal or official about the Greater Yellowstone ecosystem. It's a construct that has evolved over time with the conservation groups, the various agencies that hold sway in that area, and local communities and the states. In terms of the ecosystem itself, roughly 23 million acres, with Yellowstone National Park and Grand Teton National Park at the core. They occupy about almost 3 million acres of this 23 million acre area. The national forest lands that are in green in the map and that more or less surround the park occupy about 11 to 12 million acres. The private lands, which are in the white on at least the map on the right, occupy about 6 million acres. They've become more and more important as time has passed for conservation purposes. And you have other lands up there, including the Wind River Indian Reservation in orange to the east of the Wind River Range. You also have the yellow lands that are managed by the Bureau of Land Management, and in particular for the southern portion of the ecosystem, you have a large natural gas oil field about 400,000 acres, the second or third largest natural gas field in the country. Numerous mountain ranges running throughout the area, rivers running throughout the area, 20 different counties, 3 different states, Montana, Idaho, and Wyoming. And also looking at the map, let me note in the dark green, I believe it's on both maps, bordering the park is designated wilderness areas. So that gives you, I think, hopefully a sense physically of the Greater Yellowstone ecosystem.
Is that all?
I mean, honestly, there are layers and layers. This is one of the most complex areas when you're talking about not just wildlife, but governance, right?
That's true. I characterize the area as legal and institutional complexity and jurisdictional fragmentation. You have the National Park Service overseeing the national parks, the U.S. Forest Service overseeing the national forests, the Bureau of Land Management overseeing their public lands in the area. You have the Native Americans at the Wind River Reservation are responsible for those lands. In terms of the private lands, those are under the aegis of the 3 separate states and or the local communities. And that becomes important as we begin to get into talking about nature conservation. I probably should add that there's one other entity that has played a significant role in the area, and that's an entity known as the Greater Yellowstone Coordinating Committee. And this was formed in the 1960s. My book roughly starts in the 1960s to trace the evolution of conservation efforts. And the GYCC has initially was composed of the National Park Service and Forest Service representatives from their land managers from their respective agencies. Over time, more recently, they've added membership, including the Bureau of Land Management representatives, and even more recently, state wildlife managers to that group. It too is an informal group. It doesn't have any legislative underpinning, but they've met regularly and sort of coordinated some of their activities and at least made each other aware of their activities. This is probably a good time to add this. A significant event occurred with the GYCC in late 1980s, early 1990s, in response to a congressional report that found, among other things, that the grizzly bear population in the Greater Yellowstone ecosystem was plummeting. Counts at the time had only 136 bears in the entire ecosystem. The Congress said that you're losing it, and you're not adequately working to conserve the natural character of the area and the wildlife, and in particular, you're not coordinating. At that point, the GYCC land managers, basically Park Service and Forest Service, decided to try to address management at the ecosystem scale, and they drafted what was called a vision document, and circulated a draft form of it throughout the area. This was turned out surprisingly, it was a very progressive document. It said that moving forward, we anticipate managing the Greater Yellowstone area for its natural processes operating on an ecosystem scale and protecting basically the natural character of the area. It turned out that ignited a local firestorm politically. And this early effort at sort of installing at some official level the concept of managing this ecosystem fell apart. The local politics were intense, and the agencies backed off. And the important point, I think, to take away from this is that they never returned and haven't returned to trying to come up with any grand, overarching strategy or management plan for the Greater Yellowstone ecosystem. The result of that, we'll talk about this, is that many of the issues that we'll talk about are being addressed issue by issue or piecemeal, with an eye on the ecosystem, but nonetheless no, if you will, grand strategy to come.
Well, the subtitle of your book is Controversy and Change in an Iconic Ecosystem. Let's talk about some of the tensions. You mentioned grizzly bears. Back in the 60s, what did that look like with the grizzly bears? There's a great picture in your book
Of a bear on its hind legs, leaning up, begging for food at the car window of someone.
Is that someone or was me?
Oh,
In terms of, forget about me, in terms of the bears at that point in time, in 1963, the National Park Service, the Secretary of the Interior, enlisted Alla Leopold's son, Starker Leopold, to draft a new approach to resource management or wildlife management, in the national parks. He did so and recommended that the agency make, in essence, a 180-degree turn, in how it was managing wildlife, and that it proceed with natural regulation. That is, to let the animals roam freely without intervention, that they restore missing species. Here, think the wolf eventually. And that in turn, among other things, ended the feeding of the bears at the lodges. There were bleachers behind most of the major hotels, and tourists sat on those bleachers and watched the bears devour garbage that the hotels had deposited there in the evening. And basically, and the bears were roaming the campgrounds and approaching cars. This basically, the idea was to terminate that sort of wildlife management.
What was Leopold's reasoning? Was it he was looking at conservation science or what?
Yeah, very good question. Yes, it was a forerunner of what we know today as conservation biology, built on many of those principles. And it redirected the Park Service in a broad sense from managing to preserve scenery to managing by science to promote ecological protection, conservation, both of natural processes and of the animals, wildlife that lived on or in national parks. And anyway, moving forward in terms of bears, the bear population, the grizzly bear population in particular, took a rapid nosedive in the aftermath of being cut loose, if you will, from these unnatural food sources, got in trouble with people. A number of them were dispatched by the agency to protect visitors. And I think I mentioned the bear population hit about 136 bears toward the late 1960s. And that ignited or promoted Congress to step in with the report I mentioned. And probably the next important matter in terms of grizzly bears was the passage in 1973 of the Endangered Species Act, followed 2 years later by the listing of the grizzly bear as a protected species, a threatened species under the Endangered Species Act. And that in turn set the groundwork in place for its eventual recovery. A recovery plan was adopted. Perhaps more importantly, within a few years, the various agencies, unconstrained by boundary lines, including the National Park Service, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, which oversaw the Endangered Species Act, the Forest Service, the state wildlife management agencies, all came together with a grizzly bear, creating a grizzly bear recovery committee. And the important point there is that that represents one of the best examples of coordinated cross-boundary management within the Greater Yellowstone ecosystem, and they've basically been successful over time to the point where today there are approximately 1,000 grizzly bears roaming that Greater Yellowstone ecosystem and somewhat beyond it. Grizzly bear habitat has expanded by about 50%. That is where bears are found, and this looks like a success story. Couple of efforts to, quote, delist, that is, move the grizzly bears from the endangered species list, have failed thus far. The courts have overruled the Fish and Wildlife's decision to delist for various reasons. One of the most important ones is that the Yellowstone grizzly bear remains an isolated population, and there is concern about its genetic diversity and therefore long-term survival. And one of the important components of the recovery plan is seeking to connect that Greater Yellowstone population with the grizzly bear population that's found in the Glacier National Park area in northwestern Montana. The bears are, in fact, moving toward each other, but they still lack about 50 miles from connecting with each other.
Well, you called the grizzly bear exercise a success. What about wolves?
It's basically a success story. It took a long time. The wolves were exterminated in Yellowstone during the 1920s. In the 1940s, Aldo Leopold suggested that it was time to restore them. Movement in that direction followed in the aftermath of the Leopold report that I mentioned earlier. And by the 1990s, movement was fully afoot. Politics intervened. Some litigation intervened to some degree, but, let me back up. In 1974, the wolf was included on the Endangered Species Act. In the mid-1990s, then, through what's called an experimental population provision found in that statute, the Fish and Wildlife Service and Park Service moved forward with restoration of the wolf in 2 of the 3 northern Rocky states, Greater Yellowstone and the central Idaho wilderness area. That brought wolves in, 14 initially in 1995, and that population multiplied rapidly. I should add, unlike grizzly bears, the mama grizzly bear has 1 or 2 cubs every 3-4 years. Wolves multiply, or wolf dens number 8 to 12 pups annually. Wolf population grew quite rapidly. Hit 300 within about 8 to 10 years, and efforts were afoot to delist, that is, remove the wolf from the Endangered Species Act. The courts blocked that initially, but local political pressures from the 3 states brought Congress into the fray, and they, in essence, directed the agencies to remove the wolf from the Endangered Species Act. We now have roughly about 500 wolves roaming the Greater Yellowstone ecosystem, several thousand in the northern Rockies, I might add. Most recently, the wolf controversy has taken a turn with the adoption by Montana and Idaho of rather rigorous hunting and trapping laws that have seen a number of Yellowstone packs trapped and shot out as they leave the park, which has prolonged controversy here. Within the last couple of weeks, a federal judge in Montana has told the Fish and Wildlife Service, because of these rigorous state laws, to revisit the decision to delist the wolf. We'll see where that goes, but that sort of catches us up with where we are with the wolf. I probably should add 2 things regarding the wolf recovery in the area. One, many of you who have scientific background are aware, it has had a significant impact on the park ecosystem and beyond. The presence of wolves basically driven the elk out of the open areas into the high country. If any of you have traveled in the Lamar Valley in the last number of years, it's populated almost exclusively by bison. Back up another 10 or 15 years before that, and there were plenty of elk roaming around the Lamar Valley. That is no longer the case. But we are seeing the ecology, willows, and other things along the riparian areas returning. Aspen is regenerating where it hadn't before because of elk foraging. And in addition to that, many of us, when they did the NEPA evaluation of the wolf restoration, sort of scoffed at an economist projected $7 to $10 million annually in increase in local economic activity, and in fact, the wolf restoration has far exceeded that over the years.
I think one thing that makes these case studies really tricky is that wolves don't look at state borders. There's no fence around them. And migration patterns are complicated, right?
Like
So, how have the various agencies and constituencies tried to solve for that?
In terms of the wolves, not very well. That is, there has been little coordination, some, but very little, between the Park Service and the state of Montana, state of Idaho, state of Wyoming. And hence, as I mentioned, some of the park packs have been shot out in recent years, eliminating them for visitors of viewing pleasure, etc. When you move to other animals, I mentioned earlier the Grizzly Bear Recovery Committee, and that has been successful in coordinating between federal, state agencies to promote recovering the grizzly bear. The bison is another story. As bison have been leaving the park in increasing numbers over the last roughly 30-some odd years, the state of Montana has not been very receptive to them. They leave the park seeking lower elevation lands. As soon as they cross that boundary, they're subject to state jurisdiction. They're not protected by federal law. That is not by the Endangered Species Act. And the state of Montana has been inhospitable toward bison and basically, for a number of years, was shooting any bison that crossed the line, sometimes shooting as many as 1,000 bison over the course of a winter. That has evolved, and the coordination that is happening there has involved the Park Service, some conservation organizations, and Native American tribes throughout the region. And there's currently in place a bison conservation transfer program that is moving, well, first of all, quarantining and checking the disease status of bison. I should back up for a moment. Major concern about bison leaving the park is that they are infected with brucellosis, and there's concern that the brucellosis will infect local cattle herds, and that in turn has an economic impact on ranchers. To date, there's no case where that has occurred, even though we're some 30, 40 years into the movement of bison. However, the state of Montana has still been resistant to bison leaving the park, but accepting to some degree this bison conservation transfer program that is moving bison, once tested for the disease, to Native American reservations in northern Montana and even down into Wyoming, the Wind River Reservation, and elsewhere. And that has reduced significantly the lethal treatment of bison as they leave the park.
This gets
It's a rather migrating question.
interesting. I know. It's so much of the book. He talks about elk. He talks about bison, the cutthroat trout versus the lake trout, the pronghorn. So many on the wildlife side. But I want to get to some of the other interesting facets of this region, and one is wildfires. Now, you sort of trace the history of wildfire management and how it's evolved over the years in Greater Yellowstone. How is the Forest Service of today different from 30 years ago?
Very good question. So let me tie wildfire with the traditional priorities of the Forest Service, both in that region and elsewhere. The agency, for much of its life up into the 1990s, was by and large a timber production agency. And that was its goal. And so, among other things, the Forest Service put out fires regularly and had a 10 a.m. suppression policy in place when wildfires started on forest lands. That policy came into question about the time of the Leopold Report and a recognition that not only the Park Service, but the Forest Service ought to be thinking more scientifically and more ecologically in terms of its management practices. And both the Park Service and the Forest Service during the late 60s, early 70s began to let some wildfire fern in the backcountry. And in the Greater Yellowstone ecosystem, the important point about timber production is that in the 1960s, the Targhee National Forest, which is located just to the west of Yellowstone, conducted the largest timber sale in the lower 48 states ever, and proceeded to clear cut widely across the Targhee National Forest to the point where from space you could see a straight line where the park boundary was. The lack of trees and hence wildlife cover prompted the state of Idaho to close the forest to elk hunting for an extended period of time. It retarded some of the grizzly bear recovery because there was no secure habitat for grizzly bears on that side of the Targhee. Through a series of court cases and administrative appeals, brought by conservation groups, Targhee National Forest in the late 1990s agreed to revise its policy and reduce its timber harvesting by over 90%. We've seen the forest regenerate over the years, but that, along with what was happening in the Pacific Northwest with the northern spotted owl and the timber controversy there, basically reverse course for the Forest Service to more ecological management and protection of conservation resources, wildlife, water, etc. on the national forest. A major U-turn or 180-degree turn for the Forest Service, such that today in the Greater Yellowstone ecosystem, very little commercial timber harvesting. What cutting is going on is largely for ecological restoration purposes to minimize the wildfire danger, which of course has escalated as climate change and warming temperatures have taken hold. And we've and the agency with the ecological restoration have been trying to address principally, not exclusively, what's called the wildland-urban interface, where you have homes being built up against the national forest boundary. So that's been now the principal activity of the Forest Service as it has moved more toward, again, wildlife conservation, recreation, watershed protection, and that sort of a bird.
You mentioned a lot of things in there, so I'm just trying to decide where to go. Let's talk about the human impacts on this area. You mentioned there are tremendous pressures for development. People are moving into wild areas, and that's been, pretty steady over the last little bit, but really intensified in the last decade, right?
Sure, right after Yellowstone appeared on TV. And the COVID problem accelerated that also. But
What impact does that have on this ecosystem?
right. So a few different things. Major population growth in the area, doubling over the last 40 years of population within the basic boundaries of the Greater Yellowstone ecosystem. Number of communities growing dramatically, probably two to mention that folks are familiar with. Bozeman, Montana is now a metropolitan city, believe it or not, headed toward a population the size and a footprint the size of Salt Lake City within the next 10 to 15 years. And then Teton Valley, Idaho. I know quite a few people from Utah spend time there, and you've seen dramatic changes there with growth. So what has and some of this, in fact, much of it has been linked. I sort of facetiously mentioned Yellowstone, but what I think most, sociologists, people who study this sort of thing, assert has occurred in the area is we've seen the advent of a new West. And that's a West where there are a lot of transplants bringing their own values to the area, shifting the culture, shifting the economy away from resource development as a principal economic activity toward tourism, recreation, high-tech industries, especially with remote working today, and just a major change with folks moving in, having a stronger commitment, if you will, to environmental protection, nature conservation, and that sort of thing.
And yet, recreation has impacts as well, right?
That is true also. Net result of recreation is more and more people out on the landscape, and their presence in turn has impacted wildlife, altered recreational experiences in the area, and promoted development in new industries that want more people. And in addition to the sort of going out on the land type of recreation, what we've seen the last 10 to 15, maybe 20 years is the growth of 3 major ski areas in the area, including development around the base that in turn attracts more people. And there are some, and I make the assertion in the book, that we are edging toward industrial scale recreation that is replacing the old natural resource exploitation that was so prevalent on the public lands in the region.
So there's so much more we could talk about. I do want to get to some of your questions. Is Greater Yellowstone ecosystem better off today than it was 30 years ago?
Yes. How do I arrive at that conclusion? First of all, we've seen the recovery of the grizzly bear, reintroduction of wolves. By and large, wildlife populations in the Greater Yellowstone ecosystem are in pretty good shape in terms of numbers at this point. There is continuing concern about habitat loss, and in particular on the private lands in the Greater Yellowstone ecosystem. And those private lands are important for 2 separate reasons. One, for winter habitat, to move out of the high country, the forests and the parks, to survive the harsh winters. But secondly, we've discovered in recent years is that there are major long-range wildlife migrations that occur throughout the ecosystem. Some critters, and here the pronghorn is a classic example, traveling as much as 150 miles one way from Grand Teton National Park through the Bridger Teton National Forest, across private lands, across a major state highway, onto Bureau of Land Management lands, amidst the natural gas field that I mentioned earlier, and an effort, particularly by the state of Wyoming, to provide some level of protection for wildlife migration corridors. Thus far, the state has gone so far as to identify a number of these corridors. New technology has helped with that, and to protect 1 or 2. But a lot of pushback because of the corridors intersecting with the combination of energy activity and the sprawl that we're seeing across the private lands in the area. If you give me 1 second, a quick comment about private lands in the Greater Yellowstone ecosystem. I've already suggested how important they are at lower elevations and occupy about a quarter of the ecosystem. What I think is important to know is that the laws like the Endangered Species Act that helped to protect the animals and the basic ecology on the federal lands basically don't apply on private lands. The laws that apply there are principally state laws, state wildlife management laws, and state land use and planning laws. As to the latter, they're relatively weak, and even to the extent that they provide for wildlife, they're not rigorously enforced. The politics are such that it's difficult in many locations to impose limitations that limit individuals' property rights. As to the state wildlife management laws, they are geared toward primarily hunting, trapping, that sort of thing, and hence not nearly as protective as what you see in the national parks, etc. And so moving forward, where we have seen the, if you will, industrial type development activities grind to a near halt on the public lands, here think national forests primarily, because of, in part, the federal laws that are in place, we're simply not seeing that happen on the private lands. And the protective type laws are not nearly as strong, and that has become the new frontier in nature conservation in the Greater Yellowstone ecosystem.
You use the word piecemeal to describe how decisions are made, kind of case by case. Given the tensions that exist in all of these different areas, is there any hope for a more coordinated approach to conservation in these areas?
I would like to think so. However, thus far, we have not seen what some of my colleagues who work in the area refer to as a grand strategy that would address all of the issues comprehensively. The GYCC, in the aftermath of the vision document that I mentioned earlier, has been quite reluctant to jump into the fold, especially given politics, some of the anti-federal sentiments that prevail in the three states. And instead, what we're seeing is, again, sort of a piecemeal approach. We have the grizzly bear coordinating committee, or recovery committee, excuse me, on addressing that issue. There's bison management plans that initially were drawn up by multiple agencies addressing that issue, but otherwise, by and large, the issues are being addressed piecemeal, with some degree of success, but nonetheless a real reluctance to, if you will, come up with a grand scheme for managing the area. And that in turn is a reflection of the jurisdictional complexity of the area, the states, the federal lands, the local communities, and put it all together in our federal system. And it's been proven difficult to come up with a grand scheme. If you permit me one moment to diverge a bit, there are other parts of the country where you see these large landscapes where we have seen different outcomes, and the most evident one is in the Pacific Northwest, where as a result of the federal laws that stopped commercial timber harvesting on the west side of the Cascades in Oregon, Washington, in the northern part of California, that provided covers, if you will, political cover for the agencies to develop a Northwest Forest Plan to comprehensively manage those lands in that area. We don't have that sort of political cover in the Greater Yellowstone ecosystem.
Speaking of politics, we are in a new political era. So what does Trump 2.0 mean for this region?
Well, we haven't seen a lot happen on the ground yet, but there is, from a standpoint of nature conservation and some of the movement forward in the region, there's reason for concern. What we have going on at the moment is an effort to repeal what's known as the roadless rule, which covers about 5 million acres in the Greater Yellowstone ecosystem national forest. That gives a level of protection nearly like the Wilderness Act, not quite, but it has basically ended timber harvesting and road building. Those 5 million acres of non-wilderness land in the Greater Yellowstone ecosystem. There's an effort afoot. In fact, in the Federal Register, we already have a notice to repeal that rule. It would affect the GYE as well as national forests throughout the country. About 60 million acres throughout the country are protected by that rule on our national forests. In addition, there is, again, a rulemaking pending that would alter the interpretation of Section 9 of the Endangered Species Act, which prohibits anyone from taking a protected endangered species. That would include, for example, shooting wolves, but it also includes, perhaps most importantly, the destruction of habitat by anyone, and that includes private landowners. Here again, think of the importance of private lands for conservation in the GYE, and it would reinterpret the rule to eliminate any habitat protection that emanates from Section 9. That would rip a large hole through the Endangered Species Act. Let's see, and we also have pending an effort to alter the Biden administration's rule that would add conservation explicitly to the Bureau of Land Management's responsibilities. And here, think the natural gas field and some of those lands in the Greater Yellowstone ecosystem. There's an executive order that the president signed early in his tenure that said, go forth in the national forest and harvest timber. There's reason for concern that the Forest Service will move in that direction, but the reality is that mills throughout this area have closed. In Wyoming, over the last 30 years, we've gone from 50 mills to 12 mills. I didn't mention this, but during the Tardee Timber Wars, the two major local mills that were processing the logs coming from the Tardee after the forest revised its plan closed. So there's a practical question as to whether, in fact, the Forest Service will be able to ramp up timber harvesting to anywhere near the levels that it was at before. Energy is another question, and reason for concern that the natural gas field roughly southwest of Pinedale, Wyoming, could see additional development. It has seen substantial development already. So stay tuned on that. Thus far, interestingly, after the 1980s, energy development, and here think of oil and gas, on the GYE National Forest is almost non-existent. And in fact, although the Bureau of Land Management moved forward with rapid development of this Pinedale anti-pine natural gas field, if you look on the map where the yellow lines are, yellow lands just again southwest of Pinedale and west of the Wind River Mountains. If you jump a little further west, you'll see a strip of green coming down on the map. That is what's known as the Wyoming Range. There were oil and gas leases let there early on, and when the local folks across the board, not just the conservation community, saw the industrial development in the Pinedale anticline area, they rallied in a campaign labeled Too Precious to Drill, and convinced the powers that be, including Wyoming politicians, the energy state, to stop drilling in, or exploration or drilling in the Wyoming Range, that portion of the Bridger Teton National Forest, and to buy out the leases that had already been let, all through congressional legislation known as the Wyoming Range Legacy Act. Significant development, I think, in terms of energy development in the GYE that suggests that if we are going to see development, it's unlikely to see that in the national forest. I may live to eat those words, but no, I'll suggest that. This is fun.
Well, we have a lot of questions. If you want to add a question, go to slido.com and hashtag Stegner and put your question in there. The first one, how do you see climate change impacting the longevity of fragile species in the area, such as the cutthroat trout?
It's a major concern. And the fact that, as a nation, we're moving away from climate change, responding to climate change. I have concern that as temperatures warm, streams will warm, and that will impact the habitat of the cutthroat trout. If I'm remembering correctly, the Yellowstone cutthroat trout, I think, is listed under the Endangered Species Act. That might help some in responding to that problem. But overall, without realistically addressing the combination of drought and warming temperatures, the habitat of that species is endangered moving forward. There is, incidentally, a comprehensive report on the impact of climate change produced by the federal agencies in conjunction with Montana State University that came out about 4 years ago, roughly. If you're interested in that, I'm sure you can find it on the web, and it's available publicly. We'll provide a lot more detail on potential impacts of climate change. It does arrive at the conclusion that the policymakers are not doing enough to address that, even before the second Trump administration.
Here's another one. Can you say more about the interactions between indigenous people and the Yellowstone National Park? My understanding is that indigenous people were removed from the park. Are there moves for co-management, like at Bears Ears?
Okay, very good question. So the basic history of Native American involvement with Yellowstone National Park is obviously indigenous peoples were there long before white settlers appeared in the area, long before the park was established in 1872 as our first national park, and in fact the world's first national park. And indigenous peoples were using the Yellowstone lands. Because of the geography, the high elevation, the harsh winters, there was only one group of native people that were year-round residents in Yellowstone. The rest of the tribes, and today there have been 27 tribes identified with a connection to Yellowstone National Park, but the rest of the tribes were there seasonally. Here, think summer, fall, for hunting and gathering purposes. The sheep eaters remained in the park for a while, but frankly, from what I understand, were effectively forced out by the National Park Service over the course of a couple of decades. Sheep eater people, I believe, are Shoshone in nature. There's a couple of Shoshone reservations nearby. Wind River Reservation is a composite of Shoshone and Arapaho tribes, again, in Wyoming on the east side of the Wind River Range, considered to be within the Greater Yellowstone ecosystem. Second Shoshone tribe is in southern Idaho, in between Pocatello and Idaho Falls. Somebody probably up to you with that reservation. The Native American people, by research and experience, did not begin to get seriously involved with national park or public land issues until around the mid-1990s when Congress passed the Indian Self-Determination Act. And slowly but surely, the tribes have gotten more and more involved. A classic example of that involvement was mentioned. That's the establishment of Bears Ears National Monument here in southeastern Utah. In Yellowstone, the form that has taken is that the Park Service has recognized 27 tribes with a connection to the park. Over the last few years, it has reached out to the tribes and invited their participation in relevant resource management decisions, but has not moved to the level of any sort of co-management agreement, but an agreement to consult with the tribes. The other obvious connection between the park and the tribes is the bison conservation transfer program that I mentioned earlier. And that in turn has, I think, has the potential to, further engage Native American tribes in not only the bison issue, but potentially other wildlife issues in the Yellowstone area. I probably should also mention that the second major lawsuit challenging the second decision by the Fish and Wildlife Service to delist the grizzly bear from coverage under the Endangered Species Act was initiated by the Crow Indian tribe, whose reservation is a bit north and east of Yellowstone National Park, and is certainly the Crow tribe is part of those 27 tribes that I alluded to with an interest and connection to the park.
That's great. Next one. Could formalized legal recognition of the GYE boundaries help better protect animals like the grizzly and the wolf? And is that realistic?
Probably not, because of the politics, federal, state, interstate politics. But there are some examples of comprehensive interstate management of federal lands that we have on the books. One is in the Tahoe region, California and Nevada coming together to collaboratively manage that Tahoe area. The second is in the Columbia Gorge, in between the state of Washington and Oregon on the Columbia River. And we do see the two states coming together and Congress adopting comprehensive legislation. I think in the GYE, it's going to be more difficult. First of all, you have three different states with somewhat different interests. And secondly, the issue isn't water. You can see the collaborative interest in water in the two examples I gave. Here you're talking about land and a lot of federal land. And I don't think the states are likely to come together. The vision document experience also suggests that. I have in a law review article a few years ago suggested how one might approach that with a National Conservation Network Act, but so far nobody's called me back on that one.